Hello, everyone. My name is Barbara Mojica. Thank you so much for being here today. I am the Executive Director of NALCA, better known as the National Association of Latino Credit Union Professionals. I am excited to share this space with you today. Thank you so much for making an hour of your time to be part of this amazing conversation. I know that it's going to leave you all wanting more, so I hope this is the start of something new. And again, if you are not a panelist, could you please shut your camera down so that we have the panelists on full view? And then if you have a question or comment, please feel free to turn your camera back on. Thank you so much again. I am going to introduce Ms. Renee Sariwai. I know she needs no introduction, but I will let her take the first introduction and then she can pass it on to the next panelist.
Outstanding. Thank you, Barbara, and thank you for having me here today. I'm so excited to be on panel with these exciting ladies. Oh my God, you guys are in for a treat. I'm Renee Sariwai, and I'm the president and CEO of the AACUC, and I'd like to turn it to Stacey Bryant.
Sure. Thank you so much, Renee. And thank you so much, Barbara, and the entire NALCA Association. Also, such an honor to be here and to be part of the rest of these esteemed panelists. Once again, Stacey Bryant here, and I am the Director of Business Development for Cornerstone Advisors, and quite frankly, have been in the credit union financial services space for almost 20 years. And DE&I has been near and dear to my heart. So once again, very excited to be here. Thank you. Leslie?
So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Leslie Jenkins. I'm proud to be here as a board member for NILCUB and also representing my organization, State Employees Credit Union. Been in the credit union industry almost 20 years now. Really excited to talk to you all about diversity, equity, and inclusion, but from the lens of learning and development. With that, I will pass it to Emma.
I do not see Emma on the call just yet. She might be running a little bit late. But once she joins, we'll give her the space to introduce herself. Again, thank you so much to everyone that is here with us today. We want to celebrate Black History Month here at NALCA with this webinar called Unity and Diversity. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and kick it off and ask you guys the first question. And this is to all the panelists. And then I'll call whoever I see first. So what does unity mean to you in the context of Black and Latino communities coming together? And Leslie, I will let you answer that first.
So one of the things that we always talk about in our board meetings at NILCUB is how we can make sure that just we're being a good global citizen. And so I would say it's the work that we're trying to do with other organizations. So you see that the call has AACUC represented. And what we just talk about all the time is how can we make sure that we're bringing professional and growth opportunities to all people. And so one of the things that I would say that we're very focused on is making sure that the mission of what our organization wants to do is prioritized over sometimes some of the tactics that we might productively disagree on. So in terms of unity, what I'd say is we're making sure that we're all aligned with the future that we're trying to create for diverse voices.
And Stacey?
Sure. Leslie couldn't have said it any better. When I think about unity, I do think about Queen Latifah's song that just off the UNITY, but I digress. But I think in a more serious matter, I always think about coming together. As an Afro-Latina myself, when I think about Black and the Latinx community, I think that we have all faced very similar struggles when it comes to systemic oppression, inequalities, just based on the color of our skin and the languages that we speak and our hair and so on and so forth. So it really is taking an intentional opportunity in coming together and using our stories, using our past, using our ancestors and what they've been through, and coming together and building bridges so that we can really see social change overall. I think that, not I think, but George Floyd and everything happening soon after that really was the truest example of us coming together as a human, right? So that's for me. Renee?
Believe it or not, I have nothing to add. I'm gonna just start singing, Queen Latifah's song, UNITY. No, You guys both answered brilliantly. Let's move on.
Thank you so much for those responses. One of the next questions that I want to ask you all is, what are some of the challenges faced by both communities in achieving unity, and how can we overcome them? Again, I see Leslie first, and then you can pass the baton on.
So we got a chance to look at some of these questions ahead of time, and I really thought about how I wanted to answer this. And so a couple of things that I jotted down to myself is we are still, even in 2024, in situations where Black and Latino people are the first, and they are representing an entire people group when they're going into new spaces. And so one of the challenges is all the pressure that comes with being the first and representing almost an entire people group in those particular situations. And so what I would say is, one of the things that I would say I caution us against, some of the challenges that we face, sometimes they can be external and sometimes they can be self-imposed. And one of the things I said was being careful that we don't unintentionally gatekeep to each other. And so what I mean by that is every now and then there are moments where we get promoted to these different positions. And the pressure that we can face is we have to make sure that no other people that look like us, act like us, mess it up for us in these spaces. And so what we do is we lobby sometimes standards or requirements in addition to what is required, and we eliminate opportunities for other people. And so one of the barriers that I see is us unintentionally sometimes taking on the personality of people that have oppressed us in those spaces. And so what I would say is just making sure that we're doing everything we can to open doors for each other. And then, like I said, every time I respond, it's from the lens of learning and development. It's making sure that we're giving development opportunities to people to make sure that they are prepared and ready for these opportunities so there can be more diverse representation in spaces. Stacey, I'll pass to you, I guess, if that's the pattern.
No, I mean, absolutely. For me, when you mentioned, when you mentioned, Leslie, passing on even the baton internally, right, as we move and excel in the corporate space, you were speaking and I was thinking about Renee. And I did want to mention that, you know, Renee's most popular, if not her mantra slogan is people serving people passionately. And she repeats it everywhere she goes over and over. And Renee, like so many others, really passed that baton or the torch or asked the appropriate questions as far as she is that unsolicited mentor that we all solicit. And if more people were like her, and I know that we all are, it is our duty, part of our stewardship and our own purpose, no matter where we serve, right? No matter what we're here to serve on this God-given world, our duty, especially within our communities, is to do that, to do what Renee is doing, to championing, to fostering, to being that executive coach, so to speak. I think that if we do that, very even similar to our credit unions, as a former branch manager at American Airlines Credit Union, oftentimes a lot of our members of color, they had no idea what they wanted. So my team and I at the time, we always asked, well, what is your goal? What do you want, right? Let's not just give you the savings and the checking and the loan just so that we can go ahead and also, you know, check off the box. But are you looking to repair your credit? Well, this is how you do it, right? And so often these marginalized communities came to us and saying, well, my brother said that this is how you repair, you repair it. No. Like it's all, everyone has a different goal. How do we get there? So I think that coming full circle to that question is really championing one another. There's always that nod, right? When we see that person of color in another space, that's a nod that that's a nod that I wear and I promote with love. And I do that because it's one of how Renee says, you're one of mine. And that's a nod of, I am here to be a service to you. So I think that's a great way of us coming together, is pouring back to what Leslie mentioned and just being human. I think that component reigns so true here.
Thank you, Stacey. Ms. Renee?
Well, I want to talk about a different lens, and the lens is our cultures and how our elders are very important in both cultures. And so As a woman over 60, 63, I look good, I know, at 63. But
Yes, you do.
thank you. But the point is that it's my job to make sure that you guys are the best that you can be. Any tips that I have, I need to give that to you. So when I look at the older women in both cultures, because I can't speak for the men, but the older women in both cultures, I see unity in that. I see where we're trying to lift each other up, and so that warms my heart in terms of making sure that we make sure that we're coming together. So part of that is us not being critical of older women and us not being critical of younger women, but seeing how we can bridge the gap and get the most and best out of each group.
I love that. Love that. And Miss Emma Hayes is here with us due to some technical difficulties that we figured out. So thank you so much, Miss Emma, for joining us. And this actually leads to the next question for you, Emma. In what ways can credit unions and financial institutions play a role in fostering unity and economic empowerment within the Black and Latino communities? I know that's a loaded question, so.
You beat me to it. That's exactly what I was going to say. That's such a loaded question. What role do we play? I mean, as we look across our nation, we see the Great Divide, and it's getting wider instead of bridging that gap, it seems to be expanding. So what can we do as financial institutions? I think we play the most integral role. We have the responsibility as financial institutions to really lay the foundation and framework for how communities of color engage with their saving and spending habits. How do we educate them to do more, to make better and more informed decisions? But also, how do we help them understand the implications of the decisions that they make? So because for everything we say yes to, we say no to something else. So if we're saying yes to overextending ourselves, we're saying no to having good credit. We're saying no to home ownership. We're saying no to, so we have to help our communities understand the consequences and ramifications for the yes. But we have to help the financial institutions understand the consequences and ramifications of saying no. And so for every no we say, without further explanation, without assistance in helping to understand the why and the how do we then get to a yes? I think that is the role that we play. If the answer is no, it should be no, not right now. Let me help you understand how to get to yes, because we know the fastest and most prevalent way to get to wealth is to own something. Ownership. How do we own something? How do we own a business? How do we own our homes? How do we own, so that we're not a debtor all the time, but we do find ourselves that we eventually find ourselves in a place of ownership, because that's something we can pass down from generation to generation. So how do we get there? And as financial institutions, it is our responsibility to help communities of color get there. Now, for us, that looks a little different than it does for the Latino community, because if you think about it, we don't have the exact same challenges as it relates to our financial disparities. For us, we don't have the absolute distrust. We're gaining trust in our financial institutions, but we still have the disparities in how those decisions are made. So helping financial institutions understand and see their unconscious biases and see how those things really get to the heart of that growing gap that we have in wealth. I think that's the first step, is like really acknowledging that we have some work to do in that area. Once we make that acknowledgement, I think then we can start to figure out how then do we help not only people of color understand the yes and the consequences to those yeses that they say, but helping financial institutions understand the no and the consequences of the no that they say. So for me, I think that's where it starts.
Oh, can I add?
Yes.
Okay. Emma, that was a great setup. I love it. The other thing that we have a responsibility to do is to inform our people who are trying to help why. Emma says, if you're going to say no, what's the why of that? And then what can you do to make sure that they know? So for instance, financial institutions think that people of color don't pay their bills on time, because they don't do direct deposit, or they don't do direct debit for their bills. Well, there's a plethora of reasons why we don't do that. And so we need to educate those who are making those decisions as to why that happens and what that looks like. I remember a quick story about TruStage when they were CUNA Mutual Group, and I love how they have. And to me, TruStage is a leader in diversity, equity, and inclusion in the credit industry, along with ACC. But with having said that, I was so thrilled that at one point they had a paraphrasing. They thought that Black people just didn't want to pay their bills, and they did a lot of research, and they had somebody in the room to tell them that it's not that Black people don't want to pay. They didn't make it easy for them to do business. The only way you could have that CUNA Mutual Group insurance at the time was through direct debit. Well, guess what? A lot of Black people don't have bank accounts, or they're not putting their money in that bank account. They don't want a direct debit. They want to pay by a check. I still have 4 checking accounts. Remember, I'm 63 years old. Anyway, I needed to say that. Okay.
Thank you, Renee. And I also want to add something to that. I love what you said, Emma, because I feel like there's intersectionality between the Latino and Black communities, because a lot of us get to be the first ones in a lot of things. And when we leave a financial institution not knowing why we got declined, or what can I do to get to that next step, you do feel defeated. You do feel like, well, if I cannot turn to my credit union for advice, then I really can't turn to my parents, because they've been keeping the money under the mattress this whole time. So I just love what you were saying. It speaks to me, because I'm like, I'm a first generation person, and it's like the navigating the systems of this country has been extra difficult for me, because I don't have anybody to turn to. So I turn to the professional folks that, are doing loans for people and opening bank accounts to inform myself about, what are my next steps to getting to investments now, or home ownership. So I just wanted to add that there's a lot of intersectionality in that. And that actually moves me to the next question, which is for everyone. And here it goes. It's another loaded questions. I think all of these are. How do issues of race, ethnicity, and socioeconomic status intersect within Black and Latino communities, and how can we address these intersections to promote unity? I will let you guys volunteers. Who wants to take that one first?
I'll go ahead.
Okay.
I think about, and even what Emma mentioned and what Renee went on to mention, I think about economic empowerment for sure, right? That's the reason why we're here today. And I think about my mother. I'm immigrant, and I'm the first generation American, so to speak, and my parents are from the Dominican Republic. And I was my mom's chief of staff executive assistant since I could read. Anytime she got a letter from immigration, translate this. And I'm like, wait, what? I think they're saying something about you're expired. I don't know what they're saying. But I also think about I would never forget, my mom went to apply for a credit card, and she got a notice in the mail, and she thought she was declined, and the notice was in the trash, and we were going to use this credit card for vacation. And my mom said, well, also under the mattress type of gal, my mom mentioned, well, I think I got declined, so we have to figure it out another way. And I'm like, well, how do you know you got declined, right? Fast forward, grab the paper from the trash, and they just needed to verify her a little bit more. She got the credit card, $15,000 credit limit. And it was the disparity in language, right? It was not being able to have literature, documentation, anything that really told a story of here's what is happening and here's what needs to happen to get you there. And oftentimes, especially, I think about my mom and my family thinking that they're inferior, became submissive to not asking questions. Mm-hmm. They took that declined. All right, I guess I'm declined. Got to figure it out. Right. So I think that when I think about these intersections is knowing more, knowing that there are other ways. And as credit union advocates, that is our purpose, to understand, even as a previous consumer loan underwriter, well, how else can we go ahead and get this and make this happen for you, right? What's plan B, what's plan C, and never stop there.
So I just wanted to add something because it's picking on up what you said, Stacy, and something Emma said earlier. As financial institutions, I think we have a responsibility to monitor how our membership base is evolving and what their needs are. So, as much as they are trying to do everything they can to make themselves, somebody that could get services from us, Emma mentioned bias earlier. So there could be bias in people. There also could be bias in policies. So you want to make sure that you are designing things to meet your intended audience. I know there's a question that came in from some people, and it's, well, why don't, African Americans use direct deposit? And I would say, we do use direct deposit, but just look at your field of membership and the context they operate in. So if there's a large part of your membership base and the way they're getting paid is not direct deposit, but direct deposit becomes a qualifier of the services that you offer, you could unintentionally be excluding people groups from being able to participate in what you offer. So when we talk about, diverse voices being at the table, that's another reason why I think it's helpful to make sure that the people that are servicing your members look like the people that they service, and not just the people on the front lines, the people that are in the back office making those decisions. So I would say, kind of tying what Stacy and Emma said together, is just making sure that you look like the people that you serve and you're actually designing products, services to meet their actual needs, and then understand that their needs are changing constantly.
So that loaded question, Barbara, and it is, but I love these types of questions, right? So when you think about the intersectionality, first I need to talk about the parallels. So if we think about how are our communities parallel in this relationship that we have with our financial institutions, for me, there are a couple of things that come to mind. First of all, there's this language barrier, and not that all people of color don't speak English, but we don't speak all the same type of it. We don't understand it the same way. So when you come to me and you have these very big technical words that you're using, I don't understand. Like you, Stacy, sometimes we just think, okay, we didn't get it. And what they were actually saying is, you could get it, but here are some other things you might need to do in order for that to be possible. And we don't understand what they're saying. So we automatically discount it to me, I'm not worthy, right? I'm not worthy of credit. I'm not worthy of this thing. And so that's the first parallel. The second parallel is in the fact that there's this perception that it's taboo in our communities. And it's true. It's taboo in our communities that we don't really talk about finances. I know that growing up in my household, I saw my mom go through the bills. I saw her write the checks. But I never really understood the struggles that were behind that when she was robbing Peter to pay Paul, making sure, okay, so this week I gotta literally not float a check, but I gotta hold off a week sending this check to make sure that I get paid so I can cover all of these expenses, right? So that is that whole taboo conversation. It cripples the next generation because we didn't understand what it was like to go through that. We could see that things were just happening, right? It was automagic for us. So we're parallel in that way. And then I think the last point that I'll point out before I get to the intersectionality in the parallel is the fact that a lot of us in our communities, we don't have credit. So we come into this at an unfair disadvantage in that there is no credit score for us. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't pay our bills. That just means, I know in my community, my mom always said, don't owe anybody anything, right? Nothing is free, so don't owe anybody anything. So it was this negative perception that having credit was a bad thing. So I went for a very long time before I understood that I have to have credit to get credit. And so if you're not building that, you're punished for it as a person who wants to start a relationship with a financial institution. All of that to say, then the intersectionality comes in when, for whatever reason, there's this perception that because you don't make a lot of money, you don't pay your bill. That is not true. There are some very wealthy people who do not pay their bills, right? So we constantly have to go through this conversation around worthiness. If we haven't proven that we are unworthy, then maybe we should be given the benefit of the doubt and not necessarily punished for not having established those relationships early on. And then just the intersectionality, again, going back to language, making sure that as financial institutions that we are speaking the common language or language that is common to the population that we're talking to, so that they really truly understand what it is we're getting at. So loaded question, Barbara, love it. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, I also wanted to just add that at least for me personally, and I know with a lot of my friends that are first generation folks, and I grew up in an area where it's predominantly Hispanic Black. So Emma, you and I know where we grew up, and there's a lot of shame in the talk of finances. And I think that's where we also have intersectionality, is that for Latino and the Black community, because we've been often ostracized from financial institutions because we don't have credit or we don't have a social security number, whatever the case is. Once you are in the position to start talking about money with a professional, you go searching for a person that looks like you, because you want them to understand the shame behind those decisions that you probably had to make in college, or to get to the next point of your life. So I think that is something that is not spoken of a lot, about the shame that we carry to even have these conversations. So I really do challenge credit union folks, especially in the front lines, to have that sort of welcoming environment and don't make people feel shame, when they're asking questions that for you, they might be super easy to understand, but for that person, it took a lot of courage to sit in your office and come to you and ask those questions. But that's just what I wanted to add. Does anybody else want to add something to that before we move on?
Just one small thing. Know the difference between credit card and a charge card. Credit card and a charge card. I'm not gonna explain it, but it's important that you know the difference between a credit card and a charge card. And our communities, the intersectionality is most of us don't know the difference.
Okay, Stacy, this question is for you. What strategies can be employed to ensure that the voices and concerns of Afro-Latinos individuals are included in discussion of Black unity and solidarity?
Thank you, Barbara. I think of three pillars. I mentioned an example earlier with my mom not being able to read her English only document, where she thought that, she was being declined for a credit card, but she wasn't. But I'd say language accessibility for sure. I think it's so important that every credit union, I think Renee had mentioned it in another conversation, where in the matter of 6 years, the minority today will be the majority. So what are we doing now, right? What are we doing now to incorporate all publishings being in Spanish? We mentioned, Emma mentioned Latinos and the Black community not being able to have the solid credit score, right? Because of their behaviors or what was taught or what was not taught. And I think about like financial webinars, and I know that there's a lot of credit unions. We do it every single year, the financial literacy webinar during the AACUC conference, right? Are those being promoted to Spanish speakers? That's a way that we need to start thinking about that as well. And I also think about another pillar is representation. You can't be what you can't see. And this one is near and dear to my heart. I also shared this in a previous webinar, how before, a few years ago, anytime I went somewhere, a conference, a boardroom, a meeting, anything having to do with work, my hair was always straight and my hair was always blonde, because that's how I deemed that I had to assimilate a white woman, and that is what I thought the only way that I would be able to be seen and understood and heard was looking that way. And it wasn't until Ashley Beach Reed, I was first time I met her, and my wash and set, my straight hair was I was sweating, and then my curls started coming out, and I'm like, oh, I need to go ahead and fix this. She's like, no, you don't. And that was another deeper conversation, but it was up until then. And I have two Afro-Latino daughters, where I woke up and I smelled the coffee or the cafecito. And I told myself, no, hold on. I got something going here. I have beautiful curly hair. And guess what? I like to braid my hair sometimes. And guess what? I like to wear it in a bun. And sometimes I want to straighten it again. And I think that it wasn't until then that other people of color started telling me thanking me that I wore my hair this way. I stood out. And it's like India Ari, I am not my hair, right? So I think that representation, and that's just the hair piece of it all. As women, we can, that's another webinar I think we have to do. But representation is key, you know, putting us in leadership positions within organizations and movements, advocating for this unity, right? And the third pillar, the raunchiest of them all, is addressing anti-Blackness, right? So this is for the Latino community. We're speaking about colorism. There's colorism everywhere. You know, the Pew, I think it was the Pew, no, it was actually an excerpt from the Oxford Academic in June 2022, speaking about the political undertones of Latino skin in the color, Latino skin color in the U.S. And they spoke about Latinos who overestimate their lightness, take less liberal positions on racialized political issues than those who do not. Latinos who overestimate their darkness take more, you know, and you can see my background here. I'm a New Yorker. And for me, I thought that the entire nation was like New York City. And New York City is a melting pot of Black and brown and yellow. And I mean, you name it. And within the Latino culture in and of itself, I have cousins that they look Asian. I have cousins that they look solely Black. I have cousins that they look white, right? And in that, there's major colorism. So I think as a Latino, we have to kind of peel that back, confront and challenge anti-Black attitudes and discriminations within the Latino communities so that we can then foster a more inclusive environment. We are one. We are UNITY. So again, I'm very passionate about this. I can feel myself, you know, sweating a little bit, but I think that for sure, those are the three pillars that we can ensure that those voices and concerns of Afro-Latinos are being heard overall at a greater scale.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Stacey, for sharing that, because I've also been a huge advocate of the racism that it is within our own community. And I'll say it, it's racism, you know, there's a lot of blindness and we have a lot of blind spots as the Latino community, in acknowledging that there's so many Afro-Latinos, so many indigenous communities within the Latino community. So I do challenge all those Latino leaders to see your own perspective, to see how you see, you know, Black Afro-Latinos, and challenge your perspective and start changing that to make sure that we're creating an inclusive environment, not just for us as Latinos, but for, you know, the Afro-Latinos in our community. And then lastly, if you're white passing as a Latino, acknowledge your privilege, because it is so much privilege in being a white passing Latino. You are able to fit in rooms that most of us don't, and that come from indigenous communities or, you know, the Afro-Latino. So please use your power that you have to move the mission forward of the Black and Latino community and advocate for the rights of our people. So I just wanted to say that, and I really want to thank you, Stacey, for speaking up on that. Does anyone else want to add something to that? No? Okay.
Oh,
okay, go ahead.
Leslie, I thought you came off mute to say something. No?
Yes.
Okay. I did just want to add two small things. In the institutions that we support, we should have the expectations that they're going to support us. So if we are members of credit unions where we don't see ourselves represented, then we need to make a point. If we're that person that has to be on the board or active in, figure out what we do to promote ourselves to get to a place where we can then be the voice in the room. And I know that's a burden that we have to bear as people of color. But if you really want to change the situation, you have to become a part of the institution. And so how do we get on these boards? How do we serve in these positions where there are decisions being made about these communities that they serve and no one in that room represents that community? Board representation absolutely matters. Figure out how to make it happen. And if you are not the person and you know someone who would be befitting of the position, then figure out how to promote them and get them there. And then the other one was images. The images that we put out as a credit union industry don't represent the communities that we serve either. How do we tell our credit unions that we want to be represented in the images? so that people who look like us understand that we're welcome there. If everything that you put out there says that I'm not welcome, then I don't necessarily believe that you have my best interest. Do you keep that in the forefront of your mind, that I'm represented in the decisions that you make? So yeah, we have to figure out how to be on boards and then change the narrative so that we become a part of what they portray in terms of our communities, how we are portrayed in our communities.
I love that. Oh, sorry, I was on mute. So the next question is from Ms. Renee, and I'm excited to hear this from you, Ms. Renee, because I know you've been doing this work for a really long time. What are practical steps that credit union professionals can take to build bridges between Black and Latino communities within their organizations and beyond?
So as Stacy, thank you, Barbara, for the question. As Stacy said, I'm the possibility of people serving other people passionately. I'll say that again. I'm the possibility of people serving other people passionately. So the first thing that I would say is to be bold, be mindful, and be brave. And what I mean by that is to have a bold spirit. We are so blessed at ACUC to have the Latina experience, if you will. Grace Sanchez, I call her General Sanchez, and of course, Esperanza Poblano Cox, who works diligently with ACUC. Having those two ladies there gives us a whole different perspective about a lot of things, along with their hard work, very hardworking ladies. And so with making sure that you're doing best practices, it's about being transparent. It's about having the conversations when something is uncomfortable, when culture clashes, when they're not the same, when you really want to make sure that you're getting it right. When our VP of Operations, Kelly Smith, gave us this year to always think the best. Kevin Martin says, assume good intent. I love hearing him say that. So I think the way that we make sure that we foster great relationships, like Stacy. I see Stacy once a year. Once a year at GAC, she gets lunch. I get to cook her lunch. Doing the same thing with Emma. I get to go to lunch with Emma at GAC. I know I'm going to have that relationship. So being bold, being mindful, being brave, making sure that you're reaching out. ACUC, before you were hired, Barbara, ACUC Board of Directors approved a little bit of money for NALCUP to hire an executive director. They at the time they weren't ready. They were waiting on you. And so just making sure that those bridges are taken together. For Black History Month, I gave a blast of the past to the Board of Directors of ACUC. One of those blasts was it was a three-way partnership and memorandum of understanding between NALCUP, ACUC, and Inclusive. And so, well, they were the Federation at the time. But those are the things, being very bold about moving forward with one another, having those tough conversations. Barbara, you and I have had some very tough conversations, but I want you to win. And I know that I've had to say, okay, honey, hold back a little bit. They're not ready for all of that. And it's that kind of thing, not letting someone walk into the lion's den without being prepared. And so I think that the best way we can do that, again, is to be bold, be mindful, and be brave. And in the brave part of it, making sure that you are putting people out front when you can. One of my dearest interns, who's now just killing it in the game at TruStage, is Sela. Oh my gosh, she was my intern in 2018. What? And just for the conference, and look at her now, she's doing all kinds of great things. And so again, attaching yourself to people who work hard but want to do better.
I love that. And I'll just say that NALCUP is 100% committed to working with AACC very closely, because there is a lot of intersectionality in the work that we're doing. And want to thank you publicly for, you know, being the leader in this space and making a way for me, a super young, you know, undocumented person, to be part of this space as well. So, and I always appreciate your advice. It always comes through at the correct time. So thank you so much for that, Ms. Renee. Does anybody else have things to add to that, or comments that you would want to share with the group? No? Awesome. I'm going to move on to the next question. This is for everyone, so I'll start with Miss Leslie, and then we can move around the room. How can we leverage cultural exchange and share experiences to strengthen bonds between our communities?
So what I like about this question, I'm kind of going to steal Emma's point of there's a lot that we have in common with experiences. And so earlier we were talking about specifically for the Black and Latino community, that education about money wasn't something that was intentionally taught to a lot of us. So Stacy mentioned you're a lot of times in roles where you're trying to help advise your parents, or you're trying to do as best you can to help your parents make an educated decision by being the interpreter. And then for those of us in the African American community, you know, we grow up robbing Peter to pay Paul. And sometimes what can happen is long term, you're operating from a scarcity mindset. And a lot of what I would say that we can learn from, grow from, and do better is actually learning from those experiences and starting to graduate up the people that are coming after us. So what do we have in common? There's not a lot of education. There's not a lot of talking. There's not a lot of understanding of how money is a tool for economic empowerment, and how economic empowerment facilitates opportunities, and how opportunities give you mobility. And so what I would say is all those things brought together, there's similarities in how we can use those two things to work together to give opportunities to a generation that did not have them before.
Love that. Stacy, want to go next? You're muted.
Of course, at least happens at least once. I think about the community engagement piece of it as well, right? Apart from the financial literacy and part of the community engagement is perhaps drawing up an event in which we're speaking about repair and credit, or retirement, so to speak. But I'm also, this question really took me to this past holiday. It was the first time that I celebrated Kwanzaa with my daughters. And I've wanted to celebrate it for the past couple of years, but I didn't know enough. And thankfully, with Google's help and with some other friends that also celebrate Kwanzaa, it really made my daughters that much closer to who we are as a people, and even from our ancestors. And it collectively brought us to, how do we work together? How do we go back and understand our adversities and what we've been through? And how do we go ahead and also serve our purpose, right? We mentioned stewardship earlier. We mentioned even serving our purpose through economic empowerment. How do we come together and support one another? So I think that when I speak about community engagements, I feel like we should all, I think about, all right, you know what? Let's throw and per my 8-year-old's request, she wants us to throw a Kwanzaa party next year or this upcoming year and invite the entire community. And I think that we're the only ones that celebrate Kwanzaa in this community. So that being said, I think that if we actively engage together and we're understanding other cultural differences, and we pose that in as some sort of a audience stage, we'll learn that much more, and this can be a way that we can help and attract and retain diverse members when we're thinking about it from a credit union's perspective. I know that Cinco de Mayo is not only about tacos, right? Like, what do we do? What do we do in bringing that component in? And there's so many other holidays that we can use, or traditions that we can use, and we can implement those in our financial institutions within our team, so that we can understand each other a little bit more.
Emma?
So I love, Stacy, I love what you were talking about, that excitement from young people about learning and how can I spread this knowledge. I am very passionate about knowledge exchange. So when we talk about cultural exchange, Miss Renee and AACUC launched the exchange program, and I'm probably stealing some of her thunder, but I thought it was absolutely brilliant to do that. And part of that is because perspective is reality. So the things that I experience shape my mindset around all of the things. And so I use that as a gauge for how I behave around groups of people. And when you broaden that perspective and you give exposure and different experiences to them, then there's a deeper understanding of not only what has happened, but what is possible. And so there's a saying that experience is the best teacher. I tweak it just a little bit to say someone else's experience is the best teacher, right? So I don't have to go through everything to understand how to navigate things that someone else has already mastered. And when we think about the conversation that Renee and Barbara just had, where they talked about this, hey, we have these difficult conversations, but it is all in the vein of love because I want you to succeed. And so when we have mentors like that, that we can sit at their feet, we can learn, we can grow, we can mature, there's grace in the mistakes that we make, and we're not always punished for them. It gives us a whole new appreciation, but also an expanded perspective that helps us really understand the nuances of how to navigate situations that we would have otherwise stumbled in.
I love that. Ms. Renee?
Well, at ACC, all we do is culture. So our commitment to change conversations, the CCP program, Culture Exchange Program, that program was created specifically to, Dan McHugh and Tony Hernandez brought it to me. And they said, this is a really good idea. What do you think about that? And what it was based off of Tony's experience in the military, the Air Force specifically, where he said, you know, we're all working together as soldiers. And so they were great mentoring. And so from an article that those two had written, they came to me with that and they said, let's do it. And we created this program that has just continued to go. But in that program, we've paired up Caucasian people with people of color and having those exchanges, making sure that people are knowing about one another. I think that people aren't born racist. They're taught that. And imagine if you don't have any interaction with people and all you see are the images that you see on TV, especially about African Americans, you're going to be scared, worried, concerned. It's real for white women to clutch their purse when they see a white man go by. I've seen a woman clutch her purse when I walk by, like, lady, I don't want your money. But anyway, so that kind of thing is what can make it better. At ACC, we're trying to make sure that people understand culture, they're understanding Black people and some of the things that we do. At our conferences, it's important to me that we have the $1 billion credit union presidents come on the stage. And when they come on the stage, the African Americans that are sitting in the room are like, oh my God, I can reach that too. And so just making people aware that the images that you see on TV about people of color probably aren't true if they're negative. It's not the whole case, it's a subset. And so looking at it from that standpoint, and again, education is key. What can you teach somebody else, and being transparent about that? We don't have all the answers, but it's important to try to move forward. And so with the Commitment to Change Credit Union Tonight Against Racism initiative, ACC feels like we're bringing the credit union movement together. We're having conversations and we're making statements about things that aren't right, and we're speaking up about it. Not as loudly as Barbara, but we do speak up about it.
It might be my generation, but I did want to add for me, it's always been important for people that have paved the way to give me advice, and for the younger people that are becoming leaders, I just want to say it's super, super important that if you're going to be part of this space, especially the DEI space, which I've learned is a difficult area to be sometimes, you have to be humble about the advice that people are giving you, and you cannot take it personally. They're giving you the advice because, like Emma said, they've already walked that path. They know the consequences you will face if you say X, Y, Z. And those are the type of conversations that me and Ms. Renee will have all the time. And, I always leave those conversations thinking, I know she's telling me that out of love. I know. And then once you start to accept that and realize that, you can be a better leader and be more understanding and also honor the path that they paved, you know, because it's been years of you guys doing this work, and I can't just come in here into the space and, you know, take up all this space, because I need to make sure that I'm giving credit to the folks that paved the way for me to be in that space in the beginning. So I just wanted to add that there is a question in the audience that I want to ask you guys. So I'm going to read it out here. So Asha or Asoro said, if I'm being honest, I love that we're having these conversations. I love that we're bringing awareness. I love the accountability that we have and should place in the organizations that we support. But how can we help our own space help do that? How do we continue to help them understand these challenges and the needs? How do I do my part? Anybody wants to go first?
That's a great question.
Mhm.
I would say this. The first thing that came to mind as I was reading that question, and you were reading it rather, was to be you. But to be you sometimes is easier said than done in these, you know, where we are. And I think that here's my framework for what it's worth. My framework is Stacy is going to be Stacy, and what that means is I'm going to show up regardless of my hair, right? I'm going to show up, but I'm going to be prepared. I'm going to be on time. I'm going to make sure that I get everything done. And if I feel a certain way, you know, growing up, I mentioned, you know, my family feeling inferior and being submissive and not, if they felt a certain way, not saying anything. I think that anything could be said. It depends on how you said it. And it's big on, well, this is how it made me feel. And I think that understanding, being you, coming correct, making sure that your I's are dotted, T's are crossed, right? Focusing on what you can control. And then if you feel a certain way, I think it's important to grab that person right to the side and say, hey, let me just tell you how this made me feel. These are the challenges that I've been, that this reminds me of. This is the trigger. Can we see if there's a workaround? And again, easier said than done framework, so to speak. But I know that there have been times in the past where I was chosen to show up to a certain event. And quite frankly, I remember telling them, I said, listen, I want to be more than a pretty face. Am I helping people? Yes or no? What am I doing? Right. And I hope that holds true to me. That is part of my purpose. So that's the way that I would answer that question.
Thank you, Stacy.
I do want to add something, and it's for everyone that's joining the call that just heard Stacy's response and you are in an allyship role. So what Stacy just described is the incredible amount of pressure that sometimes minorities have to bear in different meetings when they're showing up. And so what I would say is there's a responsibility that we want you to also take on, which is making that space safe. So while Stacy is saying she wants to dot every I and cross every T, what happens when she doesn't? Let's make sure that we're also giving them the education and the support when they need to change direction, change course, do something different. That's how I think we make sure there's more Stacy showing up in this space. So let's not make the Stacys and the Ajas do all the work. Let's make sure that the system is designed to support them. Let's make sure there's active mentorship for them. Let's make sure that our development supports them. Let's make sure that part of the equation is there too, because while someone is doing their best to be perfect, let's make sure that they don't bear the burden of perfection at all times. And we're not doing our part in supporting them through allyship to make sure, like I said, they can show up to those spaces and have the courage that's required to be themselves.
So
Ooh,
Leslie.
No,
Emily, I got it. Hold yours. I'm gonna go real quick. Leslie, that was wonderful and fabulous. And if someone of color tells you that something is offensive, please believe them. I don't care who tells you differently. If you're an ally and I'm telling you what I feel, don't dismiss me. Don't dismiss it. Don't tell me that somebody on your team doesn't feel that way. For instance, when they came up with America's Credit Union, for me, it sounded like Make America Great Again. And somebody said to me, well, my staff hasn't said anything to me about that. You're wrong. Well, no, it's offensive to me. It had a hole in my heart. Make it the new America's Credit Union. But again, I think that the heart is pure about the organization, but the way it landed for me is how it landed for me. Don't dismiss that. Don't minimize that. So I needed to say that. So thank you for letting me say that. And thank you for leading that in, Leslie.
Leslie also led into, hey, there is this responsibility and this burden that the Stacys of the world bear. And what I would say to not just all of the people who are the Stacys of the world, but to anyone who's in the room with the Stacys of the world, do not assume that the Stacys of the world speak for every Emma, Leslie, Renee of the world. Understand that the Stacy of the world speaks for Stacy, and that you shouldn't put the burden on them to represent every other person of color. That's a heavy burden to bear, for them to have to show up in a space and then take up space for every person. I'm not saying that they're not there and they're not speaking, but their opinions, their thoughts, their offenses are their own, and they don't necessarily and shouldn't be held responsible for every other person who looked like them or thought like them who came before them. That's a heavy, heavy burden to bear. So let's just, as an ally, be mindful that when Emma speaks, I promise you, I am speaking on behalf of Emma, because I can't speak on behalf of Miss Renee unless she and I have had that conversation, right? And I haven't had a conversation with every Black woman in the world, so I speak for myself. I go into those rooms and I show up as who I am, and I respectfully do that. And I try to do that with a delicate balance, because I know sometimes passion is unpalatable, right? Not everybody shares it. So when you step into a room with the amount of passion that I have for this work, for my people, for all of those who come behind, for people in general, it's difficult to swallow. It's a mouthful. I know that. So when I show up in those spaces, I can't always show up authentically who I am. I have to show up and then come down and meet you where you are, so I can elevate you to where you need to be to hear the next person. So I wanted to level set there. And thank you, Barbara, for the opportunity.
Thank you, Emma. Oh my gosh, I love this. I also want to say something about this, because I feel like we're all passionate, because it's like we all feel the burden of being the person that has to speak up, you know? And I just want to say, on a positive note, I had a few rough weeks lately, and all of these ladies have offered words of encouragement, telling me you are doing great. And just to know that from people that I admire and respect really moves me forward. So if you see a person of color struggling in those spaces, please be that voice of kindness that those people need, you know, especially in the spaces where sometimes the work that we do gets so heavy. And so I truly just wanted to say, I appreciate everyone that has seen me lately on a Zoom call or on a webinar, and they're like, you're not okay, but it's okay not to be okay. And I just wanted to say that out loud, because I think that has really pushed me to move forward these year and a half. It's been awesome leading NALCA, but it also comes with, you know, some of the burden of being the only person of color sometimes, or, you know, not being able to show up and say, oh my gosh, I'm so stressed today. So thank you so much for those words. And I know we're running short on time, but I want to ask this last question, because I think it's an important question to ask in this webinar. I'm going to pass this on to Ms. Renee. How can credit unions both support AACUC and NALCA, and why is it important for credit union industry to recognize both organizations as leaders in the DEI space?
If they want to do business with the people who are going to be making those decisions to bank with them, that's the only way they're going to do it. They have to have information about our cultures in order to take care of the people who look like you and I. And if credit unions don't do that, then they will die. And I've been saying that for the last 4 years, and I mean that with all my heart. And so the programs of AACC, the programs of NALCA are designed to help our members, to help the credit union industry reach out to those communities specifically. And I want to give you a shout out, Barbara, about the work that you are doing. And yes, it is tough. It absolutely is tough, but you're going to be fine, because you're a winner and you can get it done. And anybody who is doing the work that you are doing, it's okay to not be okay. I'm not fine every day. I am not fine every day. And I feel sorry for my staff. They do a really great job of lifting me up. But when I'm real bad, I call Emma. Emma, I can't take it. And sometimes I call Stacy. Stacy, let's go jump somebody. But that's a safe space. So get your people who are safe space and make that happen. But it's AACC and NALCUP. We are the organizations that will help you about the culture of our communities.
And Leslie, I also want to have you answer this question because she's part of our STEAM board and she's been an amazing leader already on the board. So Leslie, take it away.
I sure hate to come after Renee, but I'll be short and sweet. And I'll say that enjoy the resolve and support the resolve of these two organizations. I would be remiss if I did not mention that DEI is something everybody wanted to champion, but now it's getting controversial. And so what I think it's going to do is it's going to test the resolve of organizations to make sure that this is still a priority that you have. So I would say do not give up. Support the people and the organizations that are actively doing the work, which are AACEC and NILCUP. And that support isn't just money. That support is showing up and giving of your time, giving of your talent. So we need you on this journey. It's not something we can do by ourselves. We need people of color to participate, and we need allies too. So we are doing the work, but we can do much, much more if you are willing to come in and play an active part in our success. So I'll land it there, Barbara.
Well said.
Yes.
Okay.
And Barbara, and I know we're at time here, but if
Go ahead, Stacey.
I have to quote the great Maya Angelou. It just came to me right now. And you mentioned being the first, and I know Renee has been the first, and we have all been the first in many rooms. And there are often times in those times as I reflect back, I question, should I be here? Do I belong here? And I think about Maya Angelou, and I come as one, but I stand for 10,000. So we always have to think about that now and going forward.
Love it. Well, I know we're short of time. We ran out of time, but for the audience that's still with us, be on the lookout. I think this deserves a second conversation in conjunction with AACC. This might be a thing. So look forward to some more information on the newsletters of both organizations. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for making time to be with us today and for being candid and open to listening to our conversation. I want to thank the panelists for being here today. I appreciate you all so much, and happy Black History Month. We would not be here without the civil rights movement. I will say that 100%. Latinos would not have rights without a civil rights movement. We are all part of that. So